If I had known that cheesecake would become my undoing, I wouldn't have baked it. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Ava, my only daughter, showed up with a bottle of overpriced Chardonnay and a big, nervous smile. She'd just come back from her honeymoon in Barcelona, her cheeks pink with Mediterranean sun. And something else, something tighter, coiled. "Mom," she said, sliding onto the kitchen stool. "You know I love you, right?" I laughed, setting the knife down beside the lemon zest. "That sounds ominous." "No, it's just—" She glanced down, fingers toying with the stem of her wine glass. "Now that Daniel and I are starting our life together, we've been talking about the future, legacy, planning, wills." My heart did a little drop. She was 32, independent, fiercely so. We'd had our share of distance, especially after her father died, and I kept the old house. But this felt calculated. "I already have a will," I said. I know, she said quickly. "But it's old right before Dad died. Before Daniel. It doesn't reflect reality now." I looked at her carefully. Her hair was still in that messy chignon she wore when she wanted to look effortless, but her eyes were sharper than usual. "You want me to rewrite my will?" "No, I just want you to update it." She smiled. "We can help. Daniel's friend is a lawyer. He offered to look over things for you, pro bono." I should have seen it then. But instead I nodded slow. I told myself it was sweet, thoughtful. She stayed for cheesecake and tea, chatting about her trip, showing me photos on her phone. But the longer she sat there, the more I noticed how often she steered the conversation toward shared assets, streamlining estate planning, and that damn phrase, avoiding probate. That night, I opened the drawer where my will sat untouched since 2012. And the next morning, I received a document in my email inbox. Subject line, "Draft Review, Updated Will for Review," by Helen Ward. Helen Ward was me, but I hadn't asked for any draft. Inside, a fully rewritten will with new clauses, new beneficiaries, and most chilling of all, my house listed to go directly to Ava and Daniel upon incapacitation or death, bypassing any probate. Not after. Immediately. A knife of cold pressed against my chest. Why the rush? Why? Now, and who exactly was this friend lawyer? I had questions, and I knew where to start. The storm had knocked out the power that night, and I lit the attic with a dusty camping lantern. It was just supposed to be a quick search for the deed to the house. My lawyer, old Mr. Granger, had suggested I keep it on hand after I'd mentioned the new will draft. "I'd feel better if you showed me the original paperwork," he'd said, "before you sign anything." So there I was at 11 p.m., sifting through boxes that smelled like thyme and mildew. That's when I found it. Not the deed, but an envelope yellowed at the edges marked "Private." For Helen only, in my late husband's handwriting. I froze. I hadn't seen his handwriting in years. The weight of grief hit me like a sucker punch. I sat down on an old trunk and carefully opened it, hands trembling. Inside a typed letter and a photocopy of an account, an offshore trust, Cayman Islands, my name, not ours, mine, $1.3 million. At the bottom, in Robert's familiar scrawl, "Just in case they come for you one day. You'll know what this means when it happens." I stared at it for what felt like hours. The trust had been quietly accruing interest since 2006. No one knew. Not Ava. Not even me until now. I should have felt relief. But I didn't, because just last week I'd seen Daniel snooping around my study while he thought I was in the garden. Said he was looking for a charger. Because Ava had changed my email recovery phone number without asking me. Because the new will listed Daniel as medical proxy if I ever became mentally unfit. And now I was holding a secret account big enough to change lives and paint targets. My pulse thudded in my ears. I'd been a fool. While I'd been baking lemon squares and knitting sweaters for their future baby, they'd been planning mine, not just my legacy, my erasure, and they weren't just rewriting my will, they were rewriting me. Before I became a mother, I was Helen Ward Jr. Investigator at Trask and Bellamy Insurance, specializing in fraud detection. I was the one who uncovered a 7-year corporate embezzlement scheme by reading tea-stained invoices and noticing the missing dots on eyes. That Helen, she'd been buried beneath PTA meetings, casseroles, and church drives, but now she was wide awake. I started with the basics, retracing their digital fingerprints. Ava's friend lawyer, A, 29-year-old estate planner named Trevor McKnight, fresh out of law school, no bar exam passed yet, but his firm founded by Daniel's uncle, A shell operation. The deeper I dug, the more disturbing it got. Daniel had power of attorney over his mother, a woman with early-onset dementia. Her house had been sold 6 months ago, proceeds gone, her bank accounts consolidated, her name absent from any recent tax return. I called her old neighbor in Ohio. She hasn't lived here in months, the woman said. Daniel moved her somewhere in Pennsylvania, never left an address. I hung up heart-pounding. Ava didn't know, or worse, she did. I felt it bloom inside me, that sick boiling anger, not just at Daniel, at her, because this wasn't just some manipulation by a slick husband. This was cooperation. Ava had given him my medical records. How else would they know about my 2-week hospitalization last year? For that mild stroke, she had typed my name on that draft. Will, clicked send. She had sat across from me eating cheesecake while plotting how to declare me mentally declining, and for what house. My body went hot, then cold. It wasn't just betrayal, it was strategic, like a war campaign, and yet they underestimated me, because they thought I'd cave, that I'd cry or fall silent, that I'd hand over the will, like it was a favor. Instead, I drafted my own revised document with help from Mr. Granger. Tight, airlocked, everything in a revocable trust under a different entity name, my house, my assets, my offshore account, and then I went further. I staged the next encounter. I invited them to Sunday brunch. Mimosas, French toast, soft jazz. They accepted, of course, probably thought I was ready to bend. They didn't see the cameras tucked into the corners of the living room. They didn't see the old voice recorder in the flower vase. They didn't know I was watching their every word, every glance. And when Daniel said, "It's better for everyone if decisions are made while you're still lucid," I smiled and pressed record. I replayed the moment a dozen times in my mind, the smile on Daniel's face, when he said, lucid, the careful calculation behind Ava's laugh, the soft warning in her tone. We just want to make sure things are settled before anything happens. It was all there, caught on tape, and now it was gone. The SD card was clean, scrubbed, not just deleted, wiped with forensic software. I knew the signs. Daniel used to do freelance IT work in college. I remembered that from a Thanksgiving story Ava once told, drunk on Pinot. Only someone who understood surveillance would erase that well. Only someone who had reason to fear what it captured. The terrifying part. There were no signs of forced entry, nothing broken, no doors ajar, just the soft, chilling fact that someone had been in my house, someone who used my spare key. I sat on the couch, stomach churning. The only people who knew about that key under the loose porch tile were Ava and my sister Ruth. Ruth hadn't visited in over a year, which meant I tried to breathe. I called Ava. She picked up on the third ring. "Hi, Mom. Everything okay?" Her voice was all sunshine and gloss. She was in public. Her voice had that slightly raised tone of someone performing normalcy. "Someone was in the house," I said. "Someone erased the recordings." A beat of silence. Then, what recordings? I didn't answer. I let the silence stretch until I heard her inhale. "Mom," she said lower now, "I think you're just tired. Maybe you—" "No," I snapped. "Don't gaslight me." Another pause, then a new voice in the background. "Daniel, what's going on?" he asked, muffled, but I recognized the syrupy concern. "I'll handle it," Ava whispered away from the mic. Then to me, "Mom, maybe you should talk to someone. A professional." Ah, there it was, the escalation. They were done playing. They were moving toward unfit. I hung up. 10 minutes later, I received an email from a psychiatrist I'd never met, saying Alva had referred me for preliminary cognitive screening. I nearly threw my laptop across the room. They were setting the stage. If I reacted with anger, unhinged. If I refused, resistant to help. I was a woman being ushered into her own quiet erasure, dressed up as compassion. But they had made one mistake. They assumed I'd lost the footage. They didn't know I had backed it up to my cloud server, a relic from my old investigator days. I had it all. Audio, video, a copy of Daniel looking into the camera and saying, if she goes into assisted living, we could access her estate directly right. And then the dagger. Alva murmuring, if the doctor signs the form, yes, my own daughter, my blood. The video kept playing, but I couldn't hear it anymore. Just static in my head. I sat in the dark, the only light coming from the monitor. The house felt cavernous, hollowed out, the same walls that had heard her first words. Her teenage sobs, her wedding vows whispered over the phone, they now echoed with something else. I had lost her, not to a car crash or cancer or something I could bury her for, but to choice. She chose this, to see me as a ledger, a house, a liability. In the hall closet, I found the box I hadn't opened since Robert died. Inside, wrapped in tissue, was Ava's favorite childhood book, The Snowy Day by Ezra Jack Keats, pages worn soft from too many bedtime readings. She used to ask me to read the last line twice, and he thought and thought and thought about them. We used to talk about the them in that sentence, the footprints, the snow angels, the way time erases evidence. Now I was the one being erased. I curled onto the floor with the book in my lap, and I cried, ugly deep sobs that racked my chest. I cried for Robert, who wasn't here to see what she'd become. I cried for the memories I couldn't trust anymore, and I cried for the version of me that still thought she loved me for who I was, not for what I could leave behind. I must have stayed on that floor for hours. By morning, I knew what had to happen, because grief has gravity, but so does clarity. I couldn't win her back, but I could make sure she didn't succeed in burying me before I was gone. Twist, emotional climax, and then, just as I was getting dressed, I heard the ping of my email, a forwarded message from Mr. Granger, subject FYI, urgent filing from Ava Ward, attached a petition for temporary conservatorship over my estate, filed, signed, submitted to the county court, hearing date 10 days from now. My own daughter was trying to declare me legally incapable of managing my life. She hadn't just betrayed me, she had already built the gallows. The courtroom was small, nothing like the TV dramas, just gray walls, plastic chairs, and a faint smell of mildew and desperation. Ava walked in holding Daniel's hand. She wore a soft blue blouse hair tucked into a demure bun. Her face held just the right shade of concern, not too worried, not too confident. Like she was trying out for the role of devoted daughter of a woman losing her mind. Daniel looked crisp, polished. His tie subtly matched hers. Of course it did. Mr. Granger and I arrived together. He carried a single leather folder. The judge, a tired man with caffeine stains on his robe sleeve, barely glanced up as Ava began her statement. "Your Honor," she said softly, "this isn't easy. My mother Helen is the most important person in my life, but over the past 6 months we've noticed inconsistencies, paranoia, missing documents, emails sent at 3 a.m. with aggressive language." She clasped her hands like a choir girl. "We're just trying to protect her," Daniel added, "and her estate, which she no longer seems able to manage responsibly." The judge frowned. "Do you have documentation?" Ava nodded and handed over their stack. Daniel's uncle had clearly coached them emails, vague doctor's notes, bank statements with irrelevant notations highlighted in neon yellow. The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Ward, would you like to respond?" I stood slowly. "Your Honor, I understand their concern, I really do, but I ask you to listen to one thing before we continue." I nodded at Mr. Granger, who connected his laptop to the court screen, and then I played the video. There they were, Daniel and Ava in my living room, laughing, plotting. If she goes into assisted living, we could access her estate directly right. If the doctor signs the form, yes. Ava's face drained of color. Daniel leaned forward, his mouth slightly open. The courtroom fell silent. Then I pulled out the hard copies, the forensic audit, the IP logs, the backup footage records, even Daniel's mother's financial trail. "Your Honor," Mr. Granger said calmly, "we also have a sworn statement from Daniel's uncle confirming prior pressure to alter this woman's will, and screenshots of Ava attempting to log into her mother's financial account using bypass tools. We will gladly submit this as part of a counterpetition." The judge stared at them, then back at me. "I see no evidence of cognitive decline," he said slowly, "but I see clear signs of premeditated financial coercion. Petition denied. Bang of the gavel. The relief didn't come instantly. Because I wasn't done, I turned to Ava, who couldn't meet my gaze, and I said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I wrote you out of my will last week, not because of this, but because you never once asked me if I was okay. You just assumed I was a problem to be solved." Daniel turned to her, whispering harshly. She stepped away from him. He reached for her arm. She yanked it back. That's when I knew. She was breaking free, and that in some strange, twisted way was the win. Outside the courthouse, Under the gray light of a February sky, Ava stood there alone. Her mascara was smudged, her bun unraveling. She looked young again, not manipulative, not entitled, just lost. She took one step toward me. "I didn't know he was recording us," she whispered. "I thought he was just venting. I didn't think." Her voice cracked. "I thought you were slipping. I did. He convinced me. I didn't speak, because what was there to say? She let him. She let herself believe the worst version of me because it made her life easier, but still she was. Reaching. Daniel's gone," she added. "Left before I even got to the car. Said I embarrassed him. Said he'd sue me for malicious misrepresentation." She gave a small laugh, bitter and hollow. "I lost everything in 10 minutes. I finally said, no." "You didn't lose everything." She blinked. "You lost what you thought you had. That's different." We stood in silence. Years of mothering, unraveling, and rebuilding hung between us. Then I got in my car and drove home. I didn't invite her to follow. Not yet. That evening I made tea. No lemon, no sugar, just heat and quiet. And then the doorbell rang. When I opened it, no one was there. Just a small box on my porch. Inside the snowy day, the same childhood book I'd cradled during my breakdown. My copy was still in my closet. This one was new. On the inside cover in Ava's handwriting, "For you. So you don't forget the footprints that matter. I'm sorry. I don't want your money. I want my mother back." I sat down on the steps and cried again, not out of grief, not out of victory, but for the smallest bloom of hope, because maybe, just maybe, my daughter wasn't lost. Maybe she'd simply been looking for her own way out of someone else's shadow. And maybe for the first time in a long time, she was willing to walk forward in the snow and leave a footprint worth following. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who know exactly how to cut the deepest. If you've ever felt reduced to a signature, a bank account, or a problem to be managed, if you've ever stood at the edge of love and suspicion, not knowing which way to fall, you're not alone. Share this story if it struck a nerve, and if you've lived through something like this, even a whisper of it, tell us. One line, one memory. Someone else might be waiting to see themselves in your words. Subscribe for more stories that dig deep into inheritance betrayal and the quiet, devastating ways family breaks, and sometimes mends, because silence shouldn't be the only thing we leave behind.